Carolyn Ryan with the America Project, and I am joined today by John Frankman, who is a former Green Beret, a veteran, and he is here at the America Fest in Phoenix 2023 with a really extraordinary story. John, I want to delve into that. You were discharged from the military for refusing the COVID vaccine. Is that right?
So, sort of. So I was involved, I voluntarily separated from the military because I chose not to get the COVID shot.
Okay.
And basically, I lost out on so many career opportunities that at that point, it wasn't worth it for me to stay in anymore.
Okay, so it didn't reach the point to where they had to discharge you. You said, I'm out.
What happened, I put my religious exemption in, and it was never answered. So the mandate went out in August of 2021. I put my religious exemption in October of 2021, and then the mandate was rescinded in December of 2022. That whole time, never had my religious exemption denied, never had an appeal denied, but what the military did is it punished service members for not complying, and they tried to make it as difficult as they could. So the policy didn't allow me to deploy, didn't allow me to travel, and it didn't allow me to move on to future duty assignments. So
why do you think they didn't just discharge you?
I think that every branch went about it as specifically as they could in order to coerce people to comply.
Yeah.
The FDA-approved shot is called Comirnaty. It should be called conformity because that's what they were after.
Yeah.
So before the mandate went out, they would try to use whatever kind of pressure, legal or otherwise, to get people to get the shot. So NCOs would give a lot of pressure to different service members. And then at the highest level, policies were made to punish people who didn't get the shot. So for instance, before the shot was available, you'd have service members who didn't have to wear a mask, they didn't have to test regularly, but now that the vaccine's available, they had masking requirements, they had testing requirements.
Right.
You had to stay in quarantine for a longer period if you weren't vaccinated versus if you were vaccinated. And ultimately, my team was probably the least vaccinated Special Forces detachment because I told my guys, the Army's policy, I will neither punish or reward you based on whether you get this shot. The majority of them chose not to get it until the mandate went into effect. For that, we had a deployment taken from us to a Central American country before the mandate went out that didn't even have a shot requirement because 1st Special Forces Command required that you be vaccinated in order to deploy. All of this solely for the sake of punishing those who don't comply.
Do you think they didn't necessarily discharge your branch in particular? You are Special Forces and you are so highly trained and there's so few of you that they kind of knew they couldn't afford to let some of you go. I mean, that's just my gut when I hear you talk about that.
I wish they were that smart, but I think it was more based on the branch. So Army, Navy, Marine Corps, some of them tried to rush to kick people out as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
The problem with not having a denied religious exemption or denied appeal is that I couldn't pursue legal action in the same manner had they just gotten rid of it. So the military did whatever they could to avoid any kind of legal court case. So for instance, people would try to get instead of a board, they try to go to like a military tribunal where you could present the facts, show that there's people need to understand this was not a legal order. In order for there to be a legal order, there needs to be a fully FDA-approved drug. There was only an emergency use authorized drug available at the time of the mandate, making this order illegal. So every branch was trying to avoid lawsuits, trying to do whatever kind of illegal bait and switch between Pfizer and Comirnaty or conformity as they could. So with the Army, I think that they had so many service members, they wanted to do what they did to me, which was basically smoke my career out, put me on ice. I couldn't move to go to grad school to then ironically teach philosophy and ethics at West Point. That was my next duty assignment, which I was selected for ironically. But while my exemption was pending, I couldn't travel, couldn't deploy, and couldn't move on to future assignments. And a lot of units would make you test weekly, which we all know that was super painful, also not FDA approved, the test. So all these policies were just made to smoke people out.
Looking back, and do you talk to any of your former colleagues, to the ones that got the vaccine, to say at this point, do they regret it? And I'm sure at this point you don't regret not taking the vaccine.
Right. God was very good to me. I absolutely have no regret for following my conscience. And there are some who do regret it. They wish they had maybe stuck up a little bit longer. There are those cases where people have experienced some side effects, some partial facial paralysis, some weird heartbeat kind of things that they can't quite put their finger on. And these are close friends of mine, but there's other people I've come into contact with who have gotten 2 Moderna shots, and for that have had 3 heart attacks, a stroke, other issues.
Yeah.
So,
well, we know now in hindsight that young men were really, the whole population was impacted and there was adverse effects, but young men in particular having heart issues and myocarditis, pericarditis, and all of the above. And so it's staggering to think our military would put our guys, our men and women in harm's way like that. What recourse are you seeking, if any?
So right now I'm trying to, one, raise awareness, and since getting out of the military in July, have written a couple op-eds and have gone on some interviews to try to raise awareness, and I'm also talking to members of Congress. And the two kind of actions that I would like for Congress to take is, one, putting better amendments into the National Defense Authorization Act, and then two, getting congressional hearings and hearings and investigations through the proper committees. So as far as the hearings go, I would like to see the House Armed Service Committee, the weaponization of the federal government, because I do believe this was targeted against conservatives, and to get the COVID Select Committee to have hearings to try to expose what the SecDef knew when he was putting that order in. What has been the recourse from these shots? It's not just that it was illegal, it's not that just that it left many injured and was immoral. This destroyed our readiness. We kicked out over 8,000 service members. I've heard figures of maybe 80K or something reservists or something like that. And that's not to mention the retention issues, such as people like myself who made it through the mandate and are choosing to leave, and now the recruiting crisis and injured service members. So we need to fix that readiness issue, so getting the investigations and then getting the amendments. And the most recent National Defense Authorization Act did not cut it at all. Did nothing for service members.
Last question, do you think, what do you make of the fact that they're now opening the door back up to the military members who were discharged to say, okay, come on back?
So I wrote an op-ed on that letter that came out, and it's extremely frustrating because they're not actually providing any kind of policy change. They're just saying that you can apply to get your discharge upgraded. So the majority of people who are kicked out, they had a general discharge. That means that they don't get the GI Bill to go back to school. It means that they have to put that they had some serious offense, misconduct and offense, when they're applying to different jobs. So it forever ruins their life, their career. So it's not sincere at all. It's just a feigned attempt to look like they're doing something. Offers no policy change. If the military is not going to do it, the Congress needs to step up and do it, and it's just extremely infuriating, and it's going to have no effect.
Where can people learn more about you and what you're working on?
So people can find me on my website, johnfrankman.com. Also, you can follow me on social media, but I'd say before you follow me on social media, follow Jesus Christ, but then afterwards, if you still want to follow me, my handles on Twitter and Instagram are Johnny_Franks.
Well, thank you for your service, and thank you. It was great to talk to you.
Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.